Hello, welcome. Michael Coren show. It's a Tuesday, and this particular Tuesday, it's a show of two halves. I've always said that two halves are better than three. Whatever. No, it was meant to be a whole hour with our first guest, and I'm sure he'll be back on the program in the future, but because of what is going on in Gaza, the Middle East, and the international reaction, half the show will be devoted to an interview with someone who is an expert on the issue, to ask some questions about what happened, why, and what the future will hold. Let's get straight on with this, though. This is fascinating stuff. You're going to be, I think, amazed what you hear. Gary McHale, President, Canadian Advocates for Charter Equality, an organisation that does what?
Well, we tried to insist that the government and the OPP live up to what the Charter of Rights says. Currently, we have a Charter of Rights in Canada, but it's merely a piece of paper. The government and the police ignore it at will, and there is no agency that actually upholds it and forces police officers or government to abide by the Charter of Rights. So,
okay, all right, let's get some context to this, because people are going to wonder what this is about. It's about Caledonia, Ontario, where there is a major dispute going on between some native groups and people who live there about to whom does the land belong. Now, I want to just to trace the origins of this. You're not from Caledonia.
No, originally when I got involved, I was living in Richmond Hill, just north of Toronto.
All right. Why then, as a Toronto suburbanite, why get involved in something which is going on, what, an hour and a half away from you?
It was an hour away from me. The issue in my mind came down to the point that violence was becoming increasingly more serious. On June 9th of 2006, there was an attempted murder on a police officer. There was a swarming of a senior couple, and then a swarming of a camera crew, and they ended up in the hospital. And in each one of those situations, over a course of an hour and a half, the OPP stood within 40 feet and watched each one of those crimes take place.
The Ontario Provincial Police stood by while there was an attempted murder of a police officer?
Yeah, there was actually, in that particular spot, there was a police car stationed there 24/7 and had been for several months. The 4 or 5 natives swarmed an unmarked OPP van, which had a U.S. border guard in it and a U.S. ATF agent in it, videotaping the occupation on Douglas Creek Estates. They forced those agents out of the vehicle. One held a knife to the ATF agent's throat. The officers were about 40 feet away. They're always stationed there. And they did nothing.
They saw what was happening?
They saw what was happening.
Do you have video evidence of this?
Well, they took testimony from the residents, because it's right in front of people's houses. So residents gave testimony. One of the natives, after assaulting the officers, walked up to where the police were stationed there, put his hands up and said, "Arrest me," which they refused to do. And then he turns to the residents who have now come out, and one of them was a Hamilton police officer who lived there, and he's testified to the events as well. He said, "See, they can't arrest us. You're next." And then he walked back to the van.
There is an undercover police vehicle with Canadian police and an American police officer, or security officer.
An OPP officer, a border guard, U.S. border guard, and U.S. ATF agent.
And they're filming the protest.
They're filming the occupation, yes.
And then a native protester puts a knife to the throat of an American official.
Yes.
Threatens to kill people.
Yes.
There are Canadian Ontario Provincial Police, you say, watching this, and then the native walks up to them and says, "Go on then, arrest me." In Canada?
And they didn't do anything about it. At that time, he goes back and gets in the van, steals the van, and drives right by those OPP officers.
He stole the police van?
Yes. And
what about the police who were in the van? Didn't they try to fight back or to stop him?
No, they're under orders. They don't resist. The natives roughed them up, threw them out on the ground. The one officer was...
How do you know they're under orders not to resist?
Because officers have testified on the stand that they follow this, what they call the framework, and this framework is that they are to use absolute minimum force when it comes to native protesters, and that this is going all the way back to Ippawash, where that's now the solution for all protests.
A knife to the throat would justify surely lethal force, shooting someone. You're in fear of your life.
Well, the other thing...
People have been shot for less in Toronto by the police.
Well, it's strange that that same weekend there was an officer who pulled his gun and shot a driver of a vehicle who drove at him. And at the end of this particular story in Caledonia, the native gets in the van, spins it around. The officer is hurt on the ground, can't move, and he drives right at the officer. They pull him out of the way at the last moment, and that's where the attempted murder charge comes from. But then he drives right by the other officers. They don't do anything to stop him. And then a couple hours later, they returned the police van. They stole all the documents, the video equipment. They emptied a porta potty into the van, and they drove it up on someone's lawn and left it there.
What has happened now? Have charges been laid at this point?
Charges were finally laid because so much media attention from that particular day. But that was the day that I made a decision, June 9th, to get involved. I created a website. I finally got the website up and going on June 17th of 2006. And the main reason was that the media was refusing to report most of these stories.
Why?
Well, I've done lots of interviews since, and I'll tell you, I'm told many times before I even go on air or be interviewed that they're afraid of being called racist.
Okay, now just hold on, because I've little time for conspiracy theories.
Right.
Media in this country is not enormously competent, frankly,
right.
Particularly at some of the publicly funded aspects of it. But journalists want a good story. And, yeah, they're nervous about the PC nonsense, being accused of Islamophobia, homophobia, racism, anti-Semitism. But journalists will still cover a story if they think it's a good one.
They will, but they will use terms. When they're talking about the residents or myself, they'll use negative terms. They'll talk about us being inciter of violence. When they're referring to the natives, they'll say spokesperson or land protector. So the media has this way of portraying this.
Talk radio does that?
I'm not sure so much about talk radio, but certainly the printed...
The Sun would do that?
Well,
Sun media chain?
One of the reasons I got involved is on June 9th, I went through the Toronto Sun newspaper for 3 months and looked at what photos on the front page of the Toronto Sun. And the only photo they had related to Caledonia was a photo of a Native chief shaking the hand of one of the residents. There was no photo about the bridge being burnt down, and no photos of any of the tire fires, no photos of the power station being destroyed, no photos of the highway being dug up, no photos of these officers being hurt. None of the photos that you would think would sell a newspaper. A nice, good, burning bridge you think would be a front page story. None of that appeared on the Toronto Sun for the 3 months leading up. And that's why I made the decision to create a website that would cover the stories.
Okay. Again, I'm sorry to push you, but it is my job from both sides to try and get answers. I know a little about Caledonia from media. What's the station in Hamilton? CH. I've seen some of their broadcasts and other people. I've seen some of I've seen people interviewed who've been beaten up. I saw an interview with a young man I think was kidnapped, wasn't he, and was taken away for a while. And I also saw a cameraman who... I saw this on TV.
Yeah, well, CH TV has done a far better coverage. And the reason why, in my view, is that on June 9th, it was the CH camera crew that's put in the hospital, and their camera equipment is stolen. So from there on, for the rest of that year, they do a lot of coverage of what really is going on in Caledonia. By the following year, we were told even by their reporters that they were getting feedback from community groups that they should lighten up on the coverage. So what they called balanced coverage would be every time they would have me on TV, almost the first question would be, are you related to, you have any association with the KKK? And it would ask me every single time. Now, CH Camera Crew was not the only group that was attacked in Caledonia. CBC told us they had their windows smashed out of their vans. Other camera crews had their film taken. And so the media very quickly got to realize that if they give a negative story about what the natives are doing, they could be targeted or be denied access for interviews.
You're assuming this is what they thought?
No, this is what they told me before they put me on the air. I mean...
they told you, we're going to give you a hard time because if we don't, there could be consequences.
Yes.
They told you that?
Yes, the CHTV told me that. In the early days, in 2006, all my phone calls were automatically taped. I had a tape machine there. Right. The McGuinty government actually phoned up CHTV in August of 2006 and actually told them that because you had Gary McHale on air, we are going to punish you.
You've been told this?
Well, the director of 530 Live told me I could run the story, that he had been threatened. He gave me the name of the government official, Chris Morley, who is McGuinty's press secretary. I immediately phoned him, all on tape, asked him about this threat. He didn't deny phoning up the producer for 530 Live, and the government did a press release the same week criticizing some of the stories on my website, as if the government does press releases about stories on websites.